So, welcome to another episode of 21st Century Disability. In today's episode, we have a wonderful guest called Doug Chase. Is it cat? Is it Katz or
It's
Chase?
cats. So yeah, like
Okay, so
CATS,
let's
but with with a K and a Z instead of a C and an S.
let's restart. Welcome to another episode of 21st Century Disability. Today we have as our guest Doug Katz. So welcome, Doug.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and thank you for having me. I love being on podcasts, especially ones in the community that NULU has been out to really help out. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, we're happy to have you here. Why don't we start, Doug, by telling your our followers a bit more about yourself.
So I won't go back too far. I grew up in Michigan, but and then served time in the Army in Colorado. Now I hail from Illinois, about an hour and a half northwest of the city. Um, was not like an inventor, was not a like what I am today through most of my career. I served in the military after West Point and then was mostly in the service industries. But like a lot of people, through wear and tear, through the army and athletics and martial arts, my body's just started, to have issues. I'm a disabled vet, and some of the issues I have don't even qualify for disability for whatever reason. But I'm also a knife smith, and really, in the last probably 5 years, have enjoyed trying to solve the problems that I see with creating things. And I was having a particularly bad bout with this shoulder, um, and was ready to go in for reconstruction. So I couldn't make a knife, and I couldn't cook, and I love to cook. So I was a little bit frustrated and designed what became this, which is what we call the NULU. And um, I'm fortunate to have a great team, but designed it very much around body mechanics. And I'm sure we'll go into talking later on about what makes it different. Um, but for about the last 2.5 years have been working on NULU and a couple of other projects in the adaptive assistive space where we feel we can make a difference and there's not enough development for.
Excellent, excellent. So, you were saying that you were having some problems with your shoulder, and you were wanting to cook. And so, was that the original inspiration that
Yeah,
led you to
and for
creating
me
the Nulu?
it was even less, my shoulder kind of put me over the edge, but I've got arthritis, I've got some carpal tunnel that got worse actually after the surgery, which can happen. So it was the inspiration, and it's interesting sometimes when something sparks a direction, but then you look back and certain things make sense. In terms of, I've always been sort of enamored with optimization and use of space a very, very efficient way, and all of those things. So I think when you look at adaptive and assistive, it's about optimization, because you're trying to optimize um, what's needed, or minimize, right, depending on like what you're talking about, but optimize the utility of something by minimizing, I guess, the effort to use it. And that's where what we looked at, and I've started using this one on my podcast, but this is what a normal life looks like, a normal knife looks like. And this one actually was gifted to me, but it looks very primitive, and I like that because the only way that a knife is really efficient, the traditional knife thinking is this, because you may have to use the tip or the blade, so
Right.
it's good for stabbing and cutting. If you're not using the tip, and sorry, my face is in the way of the mic, then you don't need the tip. and this is actually inefficient for cutting. You see, even when I like all of a sudden my elbow, all that goes up. So it was the inspiration because what I realized is that the typical knife design is fantastic for the multitasking that it is asked to do, or it has been over thousands of years. But what happens if you think differently about it? And that's where, for me, um, I was thinking in terms of, okay, can efficiency solve this problem where now I can cook? And what we have found is while I designed it around upper extremity issues, we are having really good um, momentum even in the sight impaired and wheelchair using. And I don't like to say wheelchair bound because
Mm-hmm.
my research in the area after I went to an abilities expo, is that people in wheelchairs vary from some who use them as needed and others who need to use them all the time. But we're finding anyone who has to work from a sitting position um, can use it much better because they can bring their core into the cutting process. So it's really been a fun adventure for me.
Yeah, well, in all honesty, when I first saw a photo of the NULU, it appeared to me as if it would be highly beneficial for the wheelchair users.
Yeah, well,
In
what's
that,
really interesting is for traditional knife users,
hmm
they they have to unlearn what they've learned. But
yeah,
for people who have a need, they pick it up and use it intuitively. So it's been that part has been really, really interesting for us, is because as a team, you make certain assumptions about how something will work and how it will be adopted. And I think actually some of our assumptions have been wrong. And this has given us a really good ability to rethink some of these assumptions and actually expand the market.
yeah. And one thing I find about disabled individuals is that uh, if they have a problem and they have a tool, they will use it in a way that they need to, and
Yep.
it suits their desires or
Yep.
their capabilities. And so it seems to me like the Nulu, the biggest advantage of it, I'd say, would be that it does. You can use it for so many styles of
Yes.
chopping, whether it's like chopping or
Right.
slicing.
So you've totally got it right. And what's cool is so this is the primary grip, and the reason is unless someone tells me otherwise, we're the only knife that if you look from here to here, this is 162 degrees of cutting surface.
Mm-hmm.
What that means is that everybody can find where it works for them. So if you're standing, and of course I'm not in a kitchen, some might use it this way, some this way, but basically you can go from using this blade in a chopping manner all the way to using this one sort of in a forward manner with that. Oh, wait, I'm going off frame here. Um, and find what works for you. And then there's a reverse cut where you can use this area, this for the precision cutting, you can use it for cleaving, but everybody can find that angle that works. And when I was showing that the traditional knife and that alignment, if you look at this alignment, it is like direct, right? So I'm using this pen to show this, but you could see this direct alignment of my skeletal structure with that blade.
Yeah.
That's what makes a difference, right? So when I'm applying force, it is, well, this is the first time I've tried to do this on camera, so there you go. Wait, there we go. You could see where that force would go directly to the blade. And that's really where the difference is. And for somebody who might have any issues, right? If you're in a wheelchair, getting any leverage is difficult. If you have any grip issues, one of the really cool things that we have figured out is if you look, there we go. If I align perfectly, right? This is aligned 100% with my arm. The blade, I know exactly where that blade is. But you can also see that because I'm not depending on this handle to take the strain, I can cut with as little grip as this. And we've been to a couple of events where there was one I went, and there was a young gentleman, and I'm not sure what the nature of his um, what caused his disability, but it looked like he'd been in an accident and had really no grip, and it was basically he had two digits at that point, and he was able to just grip it and use it. So we're finding cool things about it all the time, and it's exciting. That's what kind of what gets you out of bed, right? Like it's really solving a problem instead of um, having to create the problem and then solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this when you say we, Doug, is it referring to your company
It
or
is. So it's interesting. As I said, I had done a lot of other careers throughout my life, mostly in the service area. And when this came along, I just started building a team. And um, my first partner was a friend of mine. He had been in the toy industry of all places, but he was an industrial design guy, and immediately got it. So, the other day he was like, "Hey, are we, I want to use the term co-inventor." I was like, "Totally." Because this doesn't look this way without his vision aligning with my vision. So
Mhm.
if you saw the first one that I made, it looks like, it's very, very primitive. Even though I make knives, it was a weird, different design. I hadn't really figured out what I wanted to do with it yet, and he took the ball and ran with it. From there, we just started reaching out, and I'm really fortunate in that my time at West Point, being in the Army, having had a full career, and generally not having made, I guess, a lot of enemies, I was able to find some really good partners just by reaching out and saying, "This is what we're working on." And
Mhm.
oddly enough, we're all over 50, I believe, which it's a really interesting reflection on how our corporate structures work these days. Because of ageism, I was pretty quickly able to find people in that age group with a ton of experience and wisdom and all that stuff. I don't want to learn everything that these people have learned. So we have a team of amazing people who are experts in their field, law, marketing, ops. I'm kind of business development strategy, design and product management, and with all of those, it's an amazing team. And the vision is Nulu being our first product to market, but not stopping there. So Nulu is majority owned by another venture that most of my Nulu partners are in called Red Leg Innovation, which is the vision of that is to be a venture studio primarily in the adaptive assistive space. Because I think what we have uncovered, and you see shoots of it, but a lot of it is more in heavy tech, is that there is an appetite to support it in the disabled community.
Mhm.
There is a loyal consumer base in the disabled community. There's amazing innovation in the disabled community to solve everyday problems because they're problems that impact them, right? So I was fortunate enough to have an intersection of making knives and disabilities that was the spark, right? That was the flint and the steel to make that spark. Um, I think there's more to be had there because as part of the development of Nulu, we as a team developed a concept that we call the ability curve. And the ability curve means that you're not, ability and disability is not an identity, it's a state of being at any given time for a particular task or set of tasks. And when you look at it that way, it's a very, very different way of looking at it because Mother Nature and Father Time win. We'll all age into disability. So, as a
Hmm.
society, if we want to make it easier on the people who will be caretakers and a better life for the people for whom daily life can be a challenge in one way, shape, or form, then we should really start developing smarter. And I think there's a business to be built on that. I think that there's a place for thought leadership in that area. And I think that there will be potential for capital, especially as individuals with money age into disability and finally go, oh, I get it now. How do I write a check? Right? Like, I've been laughing lately. The one thing I've keyed in on is Skechers as an adaptive product. And you don't really think of it that way, but you're like, well, I guess it is. If you can't bend down, if whatever for whatever reason. And I look at now the broader acceptance, it's kind of more in, the pop culture and all that, but that's a great example of an adaptive product jumping to more widespread acceptance where people look and they're like, oh, I'm Skechers years old now, is kind of like the way I look, right? Like, okay, like I totally get it because now I'll buy those shoes. I think with
Yeah,
NULU, there's that same thinking. I think there is with everything because walkers, wheelchairs, all of that stuff are in all of our future. It's just what is going to happen. And the sooner we understand it and designing better around that, I think the better for everybody.
absolutely. Well, and it's certainly like a growing. You have the potential of a very large market that is about to come to be with the baby boomers now
Yeah.
aging into the seniority and disability age.
Oh,
So,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then of course that's what people are like all of a sudden like, why don't we have X, right? You could put X in, populate that with whatever item or technology would make that person's life easier when they are suddenly faced with a disability. And, I'm lucky that some of mine have been more temporary in nature. My knees and ankles, unfortunately, aren't. Those are on the declining functionality. So, I think the quicker people do understand that, listen, even a short term disability, right? It's
mhm.
interesting. You have actually short term disability insurance, but people don't think about being disabled short term.
Yeah.
And I think the way when people understand that and start looking at it, going, "Oh, okay," like the more I understand this and that this is a daily challenge for a lot of people and all that. But again, most of the time they get it is, "Oh, I was in an accident. Now I can't walk. So now for a period of time, I may have to use some kind of apparatus to be able to get around. Oh, and it's a pain in the butt. There aren't enough ramps, right? All of a sudden, for them, it's an issue." And I think that's an unfortunate thing generally that we see. But I do agree with you. I think it's getting better.
Absolutely. And I recently heard an interview that you did on a podcast called The Accessibility Advantage, which was hosted by one of the best dudes out there named
Yep.
Maxwell Ivy, the blind
Yep.
blogger himself. And I heard you guys talking about um, the advantages of the Ulu, or sorry, the Nulu, uh, for the visually impaired. Can you
Yep.
tell me a bit more about
I
that?
can. I can. And, I do want to take 1 second to say I actually love when people make the association with the Ulu and the Nulu because the Ulu it's actually an Inuit knife. It is hugely functional. Anyone who has visited Alaska, especially in the U.S., comes back with one and they love it. And what we did is we actually took what makes an Ulu good and we made it better. So if you look at our knife, an ulu would really be, if you look at this side, or actually this side right here, an ulu would look like that on both sides of it. I don't have one underneath my desk right here. What we
Yeah,
did is with this, by making it not just a crescent shaped blade and bringing it around this way, what we did is we took that force transfer that works really well with an ulu and built upon it to bring that whole 162 degrees of cutting surface to be able for the user to use it. And I know I went off course. What the question though was, um, before I went off on that tangent about the ULU, because you had said, oh,
Oh,
the ULU, and then I said before I, oh, the vision impaired. And when I talked about this earlier, and I talked about a perfect alignment, so you can see that my arm is aligned with the blade. Now, if you take a traditional knife, and I'm going to use this one again, although this wouldn't be what you use in the kitchen, there's a lot of play that can happen. In a way, your wrist becomes an area where that knife can move, and even if, and I'm being exaggerated here, but when
yeah.
you're cutting a quarter inch, a half inch in either direction, and I feel most people should be wearing cutting gloves anyhow, but you could cut your finger. And what we're finding is that I wanted to put that knife away safely. Is that with this, you know exactly where that blade is because it's where your hand is. This is where once you take away that need for a tip, you get really, really good alignment with where your arm is. And when you're cutting, you know specifically where that is. There was some degree of thinking in terms of a machine. And when we were sourcing this for manufacturing, some of the manufacturers that we talked to were manufacturers who make blades for machines. Because if you were looking at designing a knife for cutting, it would not look like the traditional knife that you see today. It would
Hmm.
be like this, right? Because, if you had a cutting machine, a chopping machine, you would want it to work like, and I'll even do it even more direct. You would want it to sort of do this, right? That's the
Yeah.
most direct way something could chop. That's not how a
Yeah.
knife, if you look at a traditional knife. So it was almost a machine thing. Well, you can see this is where I know exactly where that is. It's aligned 100% with my forearm. So that's why
And
the vision impaired community is showing interest. And I went to an abilities expo and it was very interesting. We sold just short of 30 knives, and more of them were purchased by people who were in wheelchairs who had vision impairment than the market that we thought it would be, which is upper body issues like I have myself. Because I
hmm
think you can always use leverage if you can stand and get by to a certain point. So I think until you really start running into problems doing cutting tasks to the point where the pain is so much of an issue you stop doing it, or you simply just can't do it anymore, then that becomes the catalyst to make a change. But until then, it becomes very hard to make people think about a change.
hmm So just for in case some of our followers are listening to this and rather than watching it on YouTube, when Doug was talking about the NULU and having the bottom of the blade aligned with the bottom of his hand, it made a lot more sense for
Right.
uh,
Oh yeah, you said
slicing.
that not all the people can see it. The best way I could describe it is if you looked at an ulu and you also looked at a traditional chef's knife, and if you
Hmm.
could bend a chef's knife into a U shape where the blade would continue to be on the outside,
Hmm.
that is in many ways conceptually how you could understand how that blade goes from where the heel of your hand would be to basically where the top of your hand is. You are able to use all that blade. So yeah, it's really all about efficiency. And again, I think the challenge always is overcoming people's connection to a tool that is very much about identity. There's all these different kinds of knives, and in many times, a knife is a defining cultural thing or um, a thing that defines, a job, or oh, there's so many things that are tied up in it. That's been really the challenge for us.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Doug, as we wrap up our conversation, I want to thank you for being on the 21st Century Disability podcast with us today and introducing us to your modern day tool, an adaptive tool. And could you please just tell the followers how they might find out more about you
Absolutely.
or the NULU? Perhaps your website or socials, for
Yep.
example?
Oh, absolutely. So, website is www. I don't think you're supposed to say that anymore. So I sound like I'm old, but that's okay. www.nuluknives, NULUKNIVES.com. That'll take you to our website and our store. We are also expanding on other platforms. Hopefully, we'll be live on platforms like Amazon and some of the other big e-commerce platforms in the next coming weeks.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I will have all of that information for listeners, watchers in the show notes. So
Thank you so much.
thank you. Thank you so much, Doug. It's an
Absolutely.
absolute pleasure.
To you as well.
All right.